Hello, beautiful. And what I'd really like to know is what's good in your life today? I am Kia, and this is another episode of the Female Veterans Podcast. Today, I have Martha with me. She is a retired Army everything. Like basically, she'll tell you, but she has been in like every part of the Army there is, whether it's the Guard, the reserves, enlisted, officer. So this is a big story, and I'm so excited to bring it with you. And stay tuned till the end because we're going to be telling you about a very, very special project that she is launching to help you live your best life in the new year. So stay tuned for that. But first, I want to say welcome, Martha.
Thank you, Kia. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
The pleasure is all mine, and I want to jump right into it. So tell me, what made you join the military?
That's a complicated question. So, I'm an immigrant. I immigrated to the Bronx, New York from the Dominican Republic at the age of 14 when I was already a junior in high school, just because I started school when I was 3. And, I grew up in the 80s watching All That You Can Be kind of movies and hearing that logo. And I also had a great teacher, Mr. Schulman, who was my history teacher, who had served. In fact, he went to Vietnam. And he encouraged us, people in general, the students, to join the military because he thought it was the best way, especially for immigrants, because he was an immigrant himself. He was a Russian immigrant. And, he encouraged us to go and adventure and like really give back to the community and kind of be part of the American dream. And to him, that was part of the American dream. And so as a young girl, I always had aspirations on doing things that were different, as being from a family was really male dominated. I wanted to break the mold. I wanted to be different. So it kind of, it made sense. My parents, of course, opposed the idea, but I graduated at 16 out of high school and I tried college and that didn't work out so well for me. I worked, and of course, I had all this time because when you graduate at 16, getting to 18 seems like forever because you're kind of in la land. You're not really an adult, but you're still not in high school. So yeah, at 17, I decided that that was it, and by then I was living in California, in Long Beach, California, and I decided to take that quarter. Back in the day when you had to put a quarter on the phone, we didn't even have a phone. And I went to that corner street on Orange Avenue and I called the recruiter and I said, "Hey, I'm 17. I have a green card and I want to join. But where do I sign?"
Wow.
So the
Wow.
recruiter came right over, literally came over. She said, "Hold up, where are you?" And then, like 30 minutes later, she was literally there to sign me up. I guess I was an easy target. I had a good high school diploma and I had a green card and I had a clean record. So I went in the next day, I think, for the test. It was supposed to be that practice test. She convinced me that it was no big deal. It was a practice test. It wasn't going to be the real test. I could take the real one later. But then I just took it and I thought I did well. Honestly, I didn't think I did so well, but it seemed good enough, because the numbers were different. 100 is usually what we believe is like the best. Well, I only scored like 99, but in reality, that was really low score, to be honest. But it sounded good to me and she sold it and I signed up. So the next day I raised my hand.
So tell me, well, before I go on and ask the next question, I just want to say for me, it was full speed ahead and the Montgomery GI Bill commercials for the Navy. That was the propaganda that I was seeing when I was a teenager. And also, my mom had the same idea as your teacher, where she thought that being in the military was the best foundation that you could have for life. And she wanted all of her kids, if we were if we could pass the test and get in to go in. So she got 2 out of 4 in the military. My brother is an Army vet. He also served in the 80s.
That's awesome.
So I just wanted to say that I totally identify with what you were saying. And I want to know, so after all of that and you getting yourself into the military, what was boot camp like for you?
That was terrifying. I had not been a very active physical person. Like I said, some of my limitations came from our cultural, ways, the way that we believe that women should or should not engage in different sports. So I didn't do any sports. And honestly, I had plenty of time right before, but I didn't know how to run, what kind of shoes to wear, where do I go run? And so I didn't. And so I got there, and yeah, it was pretty brutal at the beginning. In fact, I went to the fitness company because I couldn't do a push up. At the time, they get you off the bus and they yell and scream and they throw you down and they say, get down, give me a push up. And if you don't do a push up the right way with the right format, then they send you to the fitness company. It was kind of a really weird and, definitely wash out kind of a situation. You're nervous and people are yelling and screaming. And, mind you, I've only been in the US by then, a little less under 4 years. I still have a very thick accent. I'm not as quick with the language because I don't have that dominance. And of course, people yelling at you, you forget your mother's name, right? And so that was kind of the experience, but it was all worth it because we bonded. There was 56 girls. I've never been naked with anybody. And that was very intimidating to go in these communal showers and people of all kinds of walks of life. And I made some great friends. In fact, just now when we were about to get on, my girlfriend was calling me. We went to basic training together. And she was a girl from Arkansas who had never left her state either. And I was, sort of like world traveler from another country, New York, California. And we became best friends. We were best buddies, and we're still friends today.
I love that. That's what I love the most, all the stories of people who have managed to keep in touch, because I know back when I was serving in the 90s and prior to that, we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have email. We didn't It was much harder to stay connected. So I think it's so beautiful when we have those experiences where we're still really close. One of my best friends from the Navy lives 10 minutes from me. She picks up my son from school on Fridays. Like, my older son lives with her part-time, I feel like. It's
That's
just
awesome.
yeah, it's just those bonds, and I'm still really close with a lot of the people that I served with, and I love that. The only thing that I'm sad about, and I think I say this on every single episode, is none of my boot camp sisters, I don't know where they are. Viewing Company 908 at Great Lakes, Illinois, in the winter of 1994, November to January. Please hit me up. I'm trying to find my boot camp sisters. 'Cause it is such a special bond. I remember when you were saying the open bay showers, and I was thinking about no doors on the toilet stalls, and I
Oh
was
my
thinking
God,
about
yes.
how, like, traumatic in a way that was, and such a culture shock to have to shower with all of these women, and, I mean, it does just bond you having that experience, or getting screamed at right away, and you don't know you don't know which way you're going or coming, and it's all disorienting, and it's all part of that process of breaking you down. I can't imagine, like, thinking about how to do a push-up. I'm thinking how many people went to the fitness company that really didn't need to be there just because they were disoriented?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that, I mean, we got out of there within a week, and the only reason why we had to wait a week is because they only tested like on Fridays. You know what I mean? So you have to wait like your full week to be tested again and then move on. So it wasn't like we were that out of shape. We were both fairly, she was very fit. In fact, she was like a basketball player, I think. And I just, I wasn't like out there killing it, but I wasn't also like completely, couch potato type material. But it just, you're so stressed and you don't know what you're doing. And when they say do a push up and they expect you to do, this certain format, and you don't know. I mean, I did not know. Like I didn't know I needed to keep my back straight, and you just kind of try to follow the best you can. But at the end of the day, I think it was a wonderful experience because it taught me so much about myself. And by being in the fitness company, it really gave me the opportunity to learn foundation, the basics of, why you work out, which muscles do what, and how to better take care of your body. And so that all of that has really stayed with me. You add little pieces and new technology and new this and new that. And so I have been kind of a lifelong learner about taking care of my body ever since. And I think it all kind of started, early on. But I wanted to make a correction that Wanda and we lost contact with each other for many years because of the same what you were saying. We didn't have emails, and people changed phone numbers. We didn't have cell phones back in the day. It didn't stay with you. So we lost contact for many years, and it was until 2017 when I got a hold of her. And I do not have the website with me right now, but there is a Facebook group that could help you and anybody who's listening to this get in contact with their old buddies. That
Amazing.
Yes, that's how I got a hold of her. So there's a group that you give them enough data of what you know, right? Of these people, that person you're trying to get a hold of. And generally speaking, they will find that person for you, or at least give you some information about them. And that's how I ended up getting a hold of Wanda. In fact, the address that they gave me was her in-laws telephone number, like a regular phone line. And I left a message there saying, "Hey, this is Martha Diaz, blah blah blah. I went to school with Wanda. I'm looking for Wanda Beasley." And her mother-in-law got the message and then called her, and like this whole thing, this chain. But this particular group, they pride themselves in finding people, and they have found several people for me. So I will share that with you. Maybe you could put it on the notes or something and promote it, because it's a wonderful resource for people who are trying to get a hold of, their old buddies.
Oh my gosh, yes. I will for sure put that in the show notes for anyone who is trying to find anybody, myself included. So thank you so much for sharing that. I will be looking forward to that. So, my next question for you, because I know your military experience is unique in that you were in the Guard and then you were in the Army, you went ROTC and you did all these things. So, what was it like for you after boot camp at your first duty station?
It was quite a relief, I'll be honest with you. After having been in boot camp, and then, the follow on training that you go through, and, those 4 o'clock in the mornings, and pulling guard duty at night and not getting enough sleep, and then sitting in the classroom or whatever you were doing, right, for hours. When I got to my first duty station, I expected, more of the same. And the truth is, it was so sweet when the sergeant said, "I'll see you at 6:30 in the morning." I thought, "Oh, I get to sleep in." So that was kind of nice. And I went to Fort Polk, Louisiana. That was my first active duty station. And I had really good NCOs. In fact, that's one of those people that I would love to get a hold of, and I haven't been able to get a hold of. I'll think of her name here in a minute. But the NCOs there, they were very kind, very professional. They knew what they were doing, and I felt like I had really good leaders when I came in. And the unit was a lot less chaotic than I expected it, because when you're in training, it's so active, it's so busy, it's every 5 minutes of your day, it's already planned for. So in a way, it was a great opportunity for me to go from being a child, because the truth is I was so young that I was still a child. I always say I grew up in Louisiana as a soldier because I was still a kid. And so I went and I blossomed in this post, which most people, it was a terrible post at the time. There was like nothing around, it's in the middle of nowhere. And for most people, it was probably a terrible duty station. But for me, it was the right place that I needed to be to do what I needed to do. There was not a whole lot going on of, like entertainment or socializing. So I made the best of it, and I went to school at night. And that's where Sergeant Crawford comes in. That's her name. She was this E5 who, when I got there and I went through in processing, she said, "I want you to do what I didn't do, and it's get enrolled in school right away." So as I was in processing, we went to the education center and she got me enrolled, and I enrolled myself in my first college class since I had dropped out, early on before that. But That was my first college class while I was on active duty, which was immediately the first month that I got there. And I said, "Well, I don't have a car. I can't go to class because the classes were at night." And she said, "That's no problem. I'll pick you up." And so she would give me a ride, twice a week to go to class. And we did classes together and stuff. And so that was like such a great foundation for me. Again, good people along the way. And she was, another female soldier. She was a young E5, and she was just so influential in getting me kind of started on my educational journey.
Those are the stories that I love. She picked you up and took you to class. That's beautiful.
Yeah, it was. It was super kind, and she doesn't even know what a great impact it has had, on me, and not only me, but then if you times that forward into the different degrees that I have and what those degrees meant not only for my growth as a human being but also financially. Every time you get a new degree you get more money, generally speaking. And so it has had such a great impact, not only on myself, but also on my children, my mom, my family. Like everybody has benefited from one single act of kindness.
That ripple effect, right?
Yes.
It's beautiful. So you were in for a total of 24 years. That's a long time. I would love to know how your career evolved.
At first, like I told you, it was like this sense of the be all that you can be, the American dream, give back. I was very for real. And people ask me and they think I'm BSing, but I'm not. I was so taken by, wow, look at this country. It's so prosperous and wealthy. And yet they allow us immigrants to come here and, everything is kind of set out. There's jobs, there's all these opportunities. And so I wanted to give back. And, that was one of my ways. And of course, it helped that I liked it, because I think you kind of have to like things. And so I enjoy the people, I enjoy the learning, the constant push that you were getting from your leaders, even your peers. We always had, friendly competitions and who was going to finish a correspondence course faster or who was going to do more push-ups in the next test or, things like that. So we were growing physically and mentally and in all kinds of ways. And so at first I thought, I was going to be the best NCO that I could possibly be, right? As an enlisted, you want to be an NCO, a sergeant. And so you work towards it. And I did. And I tried to always just, keep checking them blocks, get better at this, get better at that, keep doing schools, military schools and civilian schools. And so at one point or another, I thought, oh, I'm going to be the sergeant major of the Army. That's my goal. I want to be a sergeant major and I'm going to be the sergeant major of the Army. At the time, we hadn't had a female sergeant major yet. So it was a bit of an inspiration, that maybe I could, what if I could, And so I started going that route. And eventually, as everything in life, you have these curves, right? That the world kind of throws at you, life throws at you. And certainly in my career, there was many of those curveballs. Like I said, I grew up in Fort Polk. I did all that. I became an E5 promotable at that. I was very lucky to be able to go to the advanced, school for NCOs, only being an E5 3 months. It just happened. It was just timing. A lot of people were coming back from Desert Storm and people were tired of being gone because they were deployed for all these months. And so when they got back and they offered them the schools, they turned them down. They said, no, I don't want to go. I'm going to get out. I'm going to go hang out with my family instead. So people like me who were eager, waiting in the wings kind of to be called, right? We were on the bench. I was called up, and of course, I answered the call. And so I went to, it's called BNAC, or at the time it used to be called BNAC. There's probably some different name now. But that was a school that it took a lot of young E5s, a long time to get to. And you need that school to become promotable to make E6 or staff sergeant. And so when I left for Polk, I was a E5 promotable. I'm only 23, just barely turning 23. So I became all of that before I was, just 22 years old, and then barely turned 23. And I PCS to my first duty station after, my first. So it was my first re-enlistment. And I had real high hopes that I was just going to move on into the enlisted ranks and, become an NCO and hopefully a sergeant major. But then things turn. I went to work for an officer company, a literal officer company, where all the officers come through to do their basic officer training and their captain's training. And I started to, continue to grow my mind that, wow, I could dream even bigger. I could get not only an associate's, but now I could get a bachelor's degree. And maybe I could do what they're doing, that kind of thing. So that maybe seed entered the possibility, because I think that's what we all need. We need to just dream of the possibility of something. And then with hard work, you get there, And so that was kind of the evolution of my career and how I went from being a total hardcore NCOs, lead the way and blah, blah, blah. And then the NCOs are the backbone of the Army to, well, maybe I'll become an officer, maybe they'll send me to school and I'll finish my bachelor's degree. And that's exactly what happened. So I was encouraged. Again, I had great leaders. Captain Jones, she was my commander, and she said, you don't have kids. This is a perfect time for you to do that. And the paycheck is not bad. So why don't you do that? So I did. I applied and I got accepted. And next thing you know, I'm putting my stuff in a little U-Haul in the back of my little Jeep. And I drove down to Florida to attend 4 semesters of school, because I literally needed just that to complete all of the ROTC requirements and get my bachelor's degree and be commissioned as a second lieutenant.
That is amazing. It's so exciting. This is the thing too. It's women who are on active duty with you, serving as these role models and helping further your career along. Because I hear all the stories on this podcast, the good and the bad. And there are often times when leadership is so poor that it destroys careers. So it's so joyful for me to hear that there's these women who are coming ahead of you, who are giving you the direction and supporting your goal of growth. And one of the things that you said that I really, really love is the seed of possibility. Like, you see that something's possible and you get the idea of, maybe this is possible for me. If I put the work in, I can do this. I can manifest this into my life, right? And it's just that not knowing the opportunity and then becoming aware of it. And just being aware of, like, this is possible for me. And I love that you, at so young, just went for it.
Yeah, I have to tell you that, and I tell that to people all the time, that it's still today, if I don't feel this gut feeling of something that it feels kind of a little bit wrong, that's how I know it's right. Because sometimes you just got to jump. I'm nervous. I'm nervous about all these moves that I made. I was very bold in my moves, taking risk and just doing it. And I'm glad. I'm so glad. I look back now and it's like, wow, I did all of that. That was so awesome. Let's do it again. Of course, I'm 53 now. They won't take me. But it's the point of taking that chance. And sometimes I find myself sometimes being paralyzed with too much thought, too much analyzing. Oh, what if, a little bit lazy sometimes, a little bit too cautious. There's all of these reasons why I don't take steps. But in my youth, I just took steps, really bold steps that got me to where I needed to go. And I had that open mind to the possibilities, like I said. And I remember one of my friends whom I had attended BNAC with. And so we were NCOs together, we were going to be NCOs forever. And I remember her calling me a traitor because I left the NCO Corps, and, jokingly, right? But, it hurt a little bit because, I was very committed. But then these possibilities came into my life. And so I moved on and really, I rationalized it, not so much because there was a paycheck associated with it, but let me tell you, it didn't hurt. It was nice to get paid, a little more. But also, I saw through Captain Jones the possibility that now I could affect more people, right? Because as an NCO, I could possibly have, as a first sergeant, which takes many years to get to, then you have a company, in the Army. But other than that, you're operating at the lower level. You have maybe a squad, a platoon, or a section. But as an officer, you could take big sections and you could have companies and you could have battalions and, all of these things. But you have to be open to the possibilities. It doesn't mean that you give up on what you are or that you betray what it is that you think you are or that you've been. It's just listen. You know what I mean? Sometimes you got to listen to what the world brings, what the universe is trying to tell you. And like I said, I took I made some bold moves that really paid off for me, and I'm really proud that I did. And it wasn't always easy. It wasn't always peaches and cream because I was on my own, literally. My family, we're an immigrant family, and my parents were factory workers. So every move that I made, it was on my own, like literally my own two hands, literally my own money, literally my own everything. If anybody helped me was my military family. My family was far away, they were up in the Northeast. And even when I moved, from one barracks room to another or from one house to another, I didn't really have those hands there to help me. It was pretty much all on my own. But like I said, there was so many great leaders along the way that made that journey just so much better.
I can identify with the support system coming from those who are immediately around you and your family not being able to support you in that way. And it just makes you tougher, I think, and it makes you really independent and grow up really quickly. So I definitely can understand that. And I want to know, I'm so curious what that shift was like for you going from enlisted to officer.
Well, the good thing is that there were 2 years in between. So the 4 semesters that I needed in order to get my bachelor's degree, being a cadet, being in college, being a college kid, and kind of learning how to become an officer. So there was a little bit of a cushion there, which I kind of needed because I was used to, being an NCO by now. And I had to kind of readjust the way I thought, the way I saw the world. And so that was, transitional. But like I said, I had time and great leaders, great instructors. But then when I got back into active duty as a commissioned officer, I found myself for several years. I mean, honestly, every year I got a little better, I think, at it. But there was many things that I still was very rigid about. And it was more of my NCO mentality than my officer mentality. And so sometimes I struggled between the doers and the supervisors. So, officers, generally speaking, create the orders, right? They ensure that the regulations are followed and they provide the resources, right, for the soldiers to execute. And the NCOs execute, they train the soldiers and they make it happen. They make the actual thing, whatever it is that you're working on, happen. And so sometimes I get caught in the middle because I wanted to be the doer, but I also needed to be the officer. And sometimes you cannot oversee a large area when you have your nose in it. You have to step back and be able to really supervise and understand how the big pieces go together. And although I was well trained, but my tendencies were to roll up my sleeves and get to work, right? And you can't do both. Not all the time. I mean, you can. There's certain things that, of course, you can come in and contribute. So I had a hard time with that for sure. And so I was again, very lucky that I had really good NCOs that would remind me when I was stepping on their toes and, kind of put me in my place in many ways because I was, you can't be two places at once. It's simple physics. And sometimes I wanted to be two places in once because I knew how to do this and I knew that I wanted to do this. But I also needed to be over here. And to be a better officer, I needed to step back. and, let the people who were supposed to do the work do the work. And so that was challenging, for sure. Sometimes I think I was probably a little bit of a hard person to work for as a young lieutenant because of the same thing and because of I have an overly ambitious nature. I was a type A and I was there to get it done. And so sometimes I think I was a little harsh on some of my NCOs, especially at the very beginning of my career. But all in all, I was just really blessed to have really good NCOs that surrounded me and helped me through that journey, because it's a journey, it's a transition. And, you don't just pin on officer and all of a sudden your mind changes. By the time I became an officer, I had been in the Army and around the Army, for like 7 years. So that's a lot of doing to undo with a new kind of way of thinking. So, yes, it's definitely a transition, but it's very doable.
It sounds like it. I was thinking that, as an enlisted person, because I was enlisted, I was thinking about my officers and they were young, right? I remember Lieutenant Baker, so with the same last name, and Lieutenant Baker and I in the pharmacy at Naval Hospital, Great Lakes. Shout out to Lieutenant Baker. She served with me there from, I want to say, 1996 to 99. And Lieutenant Baker and I were not that far apart in age. Okay. She was a few years older. So I don't know, maybe she was like 25, 26, and I was like 20, 21. And she was awesome. Okay. Like clearly someone I would have hung out with if it wasn't officer enlisted. Right. But we had such a great time in the pharmacy, and she was incredible. She was very hands-on, and there was a lot of respect I think, for her from the enlisted staff for the way she interacted with us and how involved she was with us with what we were doing. The pharmacy is a little bit different, though. We loved her for that. So, in my mind, initially when you were speaking, I was thinking how great that must have been for the enlisted personnel to see you ready to roll up your sleeves and get in it with them. But as you went on, I was like, yeah, I can imagine stepping on toes and them thinking like she need to stay in her lane, right? And then just the education and understanding, oh, okay, I need to have this bird's eye perspective if I'm going to lead effectively and efficiently. And so it's just interesting to see and hear about your evolution in that regard and how much, that your enlisted personnel supported you and helped you in that growth.
Definitely. We're all growing all the time. And if you're not growing, you got to do something different, because that's important. I think change is the only thing that is constant throughout your life. And of course, growth is one of them. And like I said, my enlisted people that were surrounding me when I was enlisted and when I was an officer, there's the one percenters, right? Where we can always talk about the bad stories. But generally speaking, people were just great. They were just awesome to share and to guide and to instruct. And again, I was open. I wanted to hear, okay, one of my favorite things to do is to call a lower enlisted, an E3 or an E4, and ask him, how can we solve this problem when we have problems that we didn't have answers to? Because I just knew they knew. They may not have the education, they may not have this or that, but they're going to figure out a way. And I want to say 9 times out of 10, I was right. And I think it was a growth opportunity for me and for those people, around me, whatever my team was at the time. But it does present, a few issues sometimes. And when you were talking about how Lieutenant Baker was your age and how you guys got along and perhaps you would have hung out, then that happens, because when you're enlisted, you're used to doing certain things, right? Like socially speaking. And then you're an officer and it's like, oh, Yeah, you can't do certain things, and I can tell you, enlisted have a lot more fun than the officers.
We know that's right.
So I miss that. I miss the fun part also. And I remember this one particular person that worked for me. And eventually we became good friends. And then throughout the years, we stayed in touch. And she went on to become an officer as well. And most recently, this past weekend, as a matter of fact, her oldest son was here visiting me. He's 16 years old, and unfortunately, she passed away in 2021. It's my friend Rebecca Suplata. She was super awesome person, and we got along just like that. We were like 2 or 3 years apart when we served in Korea, and she was definitely a super fun professional, and all of that, with full of life when we met. And we socialized as socializing can get, right, when you have that whole rank thing going on. But we stayed friends throughout. And she got out after Korea, and she went to college, became an officer, went down the rank, went down to Iraq. In fact, she was one of those teams that got stuck there for 18 months. And sadly, she passed away in 2021 as a consequence of some of the injuries that she sustained while she was in combat. And her son was just visiting me this past weekend. So it was super sweet to keep being part of, her life. And all of those things, begin in your expand of your career with those wonderful people that you get to serve.
I feel that one of the things that we all experience sooner or later is the loss of someone that we served with, and how painful it is no matter when it happens. So I just want to say I'm so sorry for your loss. But how
Thank
beautiful it
you.
is that her son was visiting you and that you can be in his life and that you have that. And I don't think people who didn't serve can fully understand the depth of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The depth of the way that we bond. I saw somebody posted something on Facebook, and it said something like, "We don't all have to come from the same mother to be sisters." And I agree, totally, sisters and brothers, because the bond is so deep that it goes on, it transcends through generations. Just like with this young guy who was here visiting me and hanging out with my own son, and it's just it's wonderful. But you are right. Sooner or later, if you serve long enough, you stay long enough, you lose people, and that's no matter how you slice it, it's just extremely painful.
Yeah. So tell me, your career was long. You
Yes.
must have faced so many ups and downs during that time period. So I have to ask you first, what was your greatest challenge of your career while serving?
The greatest challenge for me was really being torn after I had my first child between duty and a mom. That was definitely the biggest challenge from that moment forward until, I retired. That my love and my passion for the Army and for serving was the same, but I also had this new burning flame of being a mother. And you just can't be two places at once. And your heart is always torn, between being the best soldier that you could be and the best leader that you could possibly be and being the best mother. And that just ate me up every single day. I cried going to work after dropping off my kid. Not every day, but it's just kind of a repeating theme because, maybe the kid was sick and I couldn't stay home with him. And, all of these things that they don't make you weaker, they just make you torn. You're just kind of split down the middle. And it's not easy. It's not easy at all. Shout out to all the moms and dads, because I know that dads also sacrifice a lot. My partner at the time, my kid's dad, my husband at the time, he was just the best dad that I could have ever asked for. He was always there for his children. But even though he was great at it, I hated leaving the kids. I hated, especially extended, training, extended deployments. It just like tug at my heart and my soul. And it was a constant battle, whether I needed to stay in or not. And of course, when all of that happened, I had my first son in 2000. And, we all know the story after 9/11. And we had planned on getting out and just, raising our family and just doing that. But we just couldn't leave. I mean, we were committed. We were in it. We were at war. We had been attacked. And there was no way that we could leave it, but also I was very, very torn with being a parent. That was definitely the biggest and challenge of my career.
I am sure you are not alone. I have done interviews with females that had to sign over custody, their guardianship to be in the military, and it's just those stories just rip me up because I can't even imagine having to make that sacrifice. And even having my kids way later after I was well out of the military and just going back to work was just, I can't even to think, oh, I have to deploy to a war zone and leave my child to just or just getting off maternity leave, right? And having to go back to work, but you're deploying to a war zone and leaving your new baby. Like just the things we go through as women who serve our country, we're just powerhouses sometimes, and it's just incredible, difficult things that we do in service to our country. So I definitely can feel exactly what you must have been going through. And then 9/11 happening. I got out just before 9/11. So my end of reserve time was just right when 9/11 happened. And I mean, I wasn't like you. I was relieved. I was like, we're going to go to war for this. Like, I just knew. And I was like, we're going to war. I just missed having to go to war. And so many people at that time were enlisting or joining up because of that. And I was like, oh my God, because I came in at the end of Desert Storm. So that was like, I came in just in a weird time period where Desert Storm was about to wind down and there was peacetime, and then 9/11 happened, and wartime happened immediately, pretty much after that. But also in that window of time was a period where I couldn't put being in the military on my resume, and I had to take it off, like, being a veteran wasn't of value, and then 9/11 happened, and that all changed. So it was an interesting, weird time period for me to experience. And then 9/11, and then all of that happening. And you served a great deal of time after 9/11.
Yes, I stayed for 10 years.
What was that like for you? I mean, I have so many questions, but they just came to my mind. So I'm going to ask you now this question. What was that like for you serving 10 years during wartime?
It was hard. It was just hard. I was a medical service corps officer, so we do the administration of hospitals and everything related to medical. And you get to sit in the rooms where they're telling you how many bodies, are coming in and how many were transported from this place to that place and how many were to this hospital and how many passed and how many, all these statistics that even, sometimes I hear people and they don't know what they're saying. So I just bite my tongue and move on because they don't understand that combat is hard. It just really, really is. But when you're serving, especially during a war, even the person who has what people may believe is the least complicated job, it is not exactly peaches and cream because, all hands are on deck. And so even the emotional barrage that you're getting from just sitting and watching the statistics or watching in the war room, how they're kicking doors and how our soldiers are going down like flies or how they're being blown up. And then having to sit back here, and even though you may be sitting in somewhere safe, but remember that the mind is being assaulted by this constant information and tragedy and sadness of the stories. We talked about kids. So many parents lost their children when they were deployed because the people they left them with did not care for their children the way that they were supposed to. So imagine having to deliver that letter, that call, that soldier so and so is downrange. And oh, by the way, we just got a call that their baby was killed by the dog, the neighbor's dog, or, something crazy. How do you deliver that news? And every bit of that news, I honestly believe it kind of kills your soul. There's like your soul, and then there's like these bad things that happen. And the way I envision it is like it gets picked, like little tiny cuts. I think there's maybe a Japanese book or something. It's like kid kill with 1,000 paper cuts or something. Well, that's kind of how it works. That although they're not these big major things that are happening, they're all like these little small things that definitely contribute to the person that you become. That trauma that gets caught into that soul, that body, that mind, of all of those little tragedies, that they're not little as in they're unimportant, because they're all important, but they're small in the scheme of things, because when you add up a million things that happen, right, they become small only because the paper is only so big, right, and the dots become smaller, but they carry the same weight as whatever they are, and tragic and sad, and they affect people in so many ways. So it was hard. It was definitely hard. And, when my kids, I was able to transfer over 2 years of my GI Bill to my children to go to college. And my one kid says, "Oh my gosh, I'm so lucky I get to get this money," right? Because he gets the BAH. And I say, "Yeah, but you deserve it because, my kids went to daycare. Sometimes at 2 in the morning, they got dropped off at somebody's house. And then from there, those people will take them, they let them sleep, and then they'll take them to the school in the morning or pre-daycare. And then they go to school or daycare, whichever one, depending on their age. And then after school, there would be somebody else picking them up and then dropping them off and taking them someplace else. And then they have dinner someplace else. And then sometime around 8 or 9 o'clock at night, I will go and grab my kids that are probably in bed already, but they're my kids. So we go grab them and put them in our beds so that at 4 o'clock we can wake them up again and then do that again and do that again and again and again. So my kids definitely earned whatever little privileges they have had. And I know that I'm not alone in that because the family suffers so much. And so, yeah, it was hard. And after 9/11, things got very, very difficult for all who were serving. And like I said, for parents, moms, and I cannot imagine how single parents do it because I had a partner. I had a really good partner. I can't even imagine, to be honest, how they made it. And so many did, and so many sacrificed so that we could do what we were called to do. So kudos to all of those people who were able to hang in there and definitely hang tough. Because let me tell you, you had to be tough to stay in there.
I know it. One of the things that I love to always talk about is, the heroes behind the heroes, like your kids, like the loved
Exactly.
ones that support when you're off doing what you have to do, the dependent spouse, husband or wife who's behind with the kids while you're deployed, or like the sacrifices that I think the people who make the biggest sacrifice are the children. They make the
Yes.
biggest sacrifice. And I think that, it's so honorable what they do. And I love that we can do things like pass our GI Bill down, or they can get vocational training, or they get, benefits because they do. The children of active duty service members and reservists, because I know a lot of reservists got called up
Mhm.
after 9/11. They make a big, big, big sacrifice. So that is, I love that you were talking about that and about how every role, even the support roles, are so important during the service, especially during wartime. Everybody's job is significant. And a lot of people come on this podcast and they don't feel like that. They don't feel like because they weren't on the front line that it wasn't as big of a deal, or they didn't serve as long, or when they served, or what war they served in, or if they served in peacetime or not. I mean, it's all really important because we're all making a sacrifice to serve our country one way or another. So I think that's really, really important thing to say. And definitely can see, like, just, I didn't think about when you said people who lost their kids, my mind went to like, they had bad guardians. And so the system came and took their kids and maybe put them in foster care. So that's what my mind went to immediately. But then when you were like a kid that passed away, and I just was like stunned because my mind didn't go there initially. And I was just thinking, I tend to be empathic. So like I was just thinking about how that must have felt if you're like just coming in from the field and you find out that your child has been killed or has died unexpectedly or whatever. Just the things that you can experience potentially while serving. It's just, I don't think most people can even begin to fathom. And I served and I didn't even think of that straight away. Right. And I've had stories on this podcast where the guardians that were responsible and who stepped in to take care of people's kids took their kids, like stole their kids, took them to court and made them lose their kids and things of
Yes.
that nature so many times. So there's so much that we really deal with that people just can't even begin to fathom. So I'm really grateful that you brought that up and you shared all of that. And I want to ask you, I asked you what was the most challenging. And we talked about, your children. And then we talked about serving during wartime, those years that you spent before you got out. I want to know, just to lighten the mood a little bit, what was the greatest part of your experience while you were serving?
Wow. How much time do you have? uh, I had so much fun. I really did. There was a lot of challenging times, but the spirit of the military, whether it was enlisted or officer, the spirit of that sisterhood, that brotherhood, that was like the best. I can tell you a million stories. Of course, as an officer, being a commander, that is the most honor. That is the most honorable position that you will ever be in, at least in my view. And it certainly was for me. I was just so proud. I was able to command two different companies, and I loved just being able to serve, my soldiers, to provide for them and to do all of that. And so those two jobs that I held were definitely super awesome for me. But as an enlisted, let me tell you that at one point after Desert Storm and the wall of in Berlin had come down, my NCO said, I had been in the Army all this time and I never taken vacation because, like I said, I come from a very poor family. So we didn't take vacations. We didn't know what to do with that. But it was time that I needed to take leave. So my NCO said, you need to take leave. And so he says, you should go to Germany, take a hop and go over there and just party. And so I've been following the fall of the wall, the Berlin Wall. And it was recent. So that was like 91. And so I took a hop over to Germany. I knew some guys, so I went and hang out with them. And along the way, I met all these people. I met Navy, I met Air Force, I met Marines. And we just like travel along, for free, with a hop. And for like 30 days. We just wander around Europe and different bases, just hanging out. And so that was definitely a most memorable trip that I took to Germany to go see the wall. When it had come down, to see Berlin when the wall was no longer there. And it was such a wonderful experience, the camaraderie that we had. And like I said, I met all these people that back then you don't even exchange all the numbers because it was so difficult to keep in touch. But if those people are listening, we had such a great time. There was a girl that was stationed in Vicenza, Italy, and I believe she was from New York. And I can't remember if she was Navy or Army, but we certainly had a really good time. And that was like one of some of my best memories of just hanging out and just enjoying, the military for what it was.
Since this is an audio podcast, I'm going to just point this out because I'm the only one who can see you. But the smile on your face tells me everything about how much fun you had on this trip. I can just imagine. First of all, I love Europe. Second of all, just being young and having these experiences and seeing Germany after the wall, all of that sounds incredible. And the fact that being in the military allowed you to be able to go and do this. And that's just really, really, really cool. Really cool. It sounded like a
It was
blast.
awesome. It was a blast. It was a blast. So if you get a chance to do that for those who are still active duty, or if perhaps you have the ID card, if you're a retiree, take a hop and go over because that is just a fantastic experience.
That sounds really cool. So I want to know, before I ask you what your transition out of the military was like, I want to know, just out of curiosity, you have been an officer, you have been enlisted, you have been in the Guard, reserves, active duty. What's your favorite?
That's a tough
I
question.
know.
They all have their pluses and minuses, right? But I think I'm going to go with just straight active duty. And the reason why is because you're not torn with multiple tasks. I'll be honest. Both the Guard and reserves, they have to do this dual life. And while it seems really easy, it's not, because you have your normal life, Monday through Friday, and then you show up on the weekend or whenever you do your duty, and you have all these challenges that didn't sit still, right? They continue to move and evolve, but yet you're coming in with only so much time and so much energy to deal with. And on active duty, you're able to have the continuity to kind of, chip at it every day. And so I think that just pure active duty, especially overseas, you have the focus of everyone involved more so than you do in the States. So I definitely would say active duty and specifically overseas.
Outstanding. Well, you heard it here first. So tell me, what was your transition out of the military like? Well, what made you decide to get out? And then what was that process like?
So I was tired and done. Be honest. By the time the end of my career came, I was, in a sense, at the height of my career. I retired as a major, and I still had a couple of more years before I get reviewed for the next rank. So, in other words, realistically, to make it to colonel, I would have had to stay another, 7 or 8 years. And by then, my kids would have been grown. So it was a no-brainer that I didn't want to continue to miss out on their lives, because then there was that piece that I was telling you about that, you're torn between, the mom role and the officer soldier role. And so also combined with that, my ex-husband was active duty at the time, and he transitioned, or early on, he transitioned in 2004 and became my support system. He was always my support system, but now he had a civilian career, which he always had a job, but he had predictability, of time. He could get off at 5 and go take care of the kids, that kind of thing, which I didn't have. And so he supported my career, the rest of the way. And by the time 2011 came around, it was time for him to grow in his career and for me to be a full-time mom. So those were kind of the determining factors for me. Like I said, I was at the height of my career. I had a promising career. In fact, I remember the general talking to me and saying, "But why? You're going to make colonel." And it's like, I understand and I love it. Thank you, but I'm going to have to bow out. I've done my time, and now it's time for me to go be a mom. So once I made that decision, then it was made and it was done. And I put in my paperwork and I got out and I transitioned very easily. I just, put on my mama sweatpants and I went to take my kids to school and I went to volunteer at the school and enjoy every single cupcake making opportunity. And I just fully went into, being a mom full time. And I did not work at all because I wanted to be that. And that's what I did until my kids graduated from high school.
And you didn't miss it.
I missed it. Yeah. There's like this wonderful light in your life. If you ever have like this favorite light or this favorite thing that gives you energy, that was the army for me. But then I had this equally bright light. So I just stayed with the one, and every so often, I get that, oh, I miss being, and I would just say, but I have this and I have my kids. And so, yeah, I mean, I missed it, but I do things very passionately and like I jump 2 feet in. And that's kind of how I went. I just jumped 2 feet into being a mom and learning how to stand in the line, the pickup line, because
For real.
I didn't know. And there's like a whole protocol about it, right? But I never had to because somebody else would pick up my kids for me. But, all of those things, I had to learn how to be a stay-at-home mom and volunteer at the school and all of those things. So I did miss it and I still miss it. There's so often that I think, wow, I just loved, an early morning run and just sitting out there in the field and just doing nothing. Like I miss that, just playing cards with people you don't know, just anywhere. You could just do anything with these strangers that suddenly became your brothers and sisters. But I did have so much fun and just love being a mom too. So for that reason, I just let that other love of mine, my children, kind of fill that. And when I do miss it, I think back and nostalgically I remember. And then sometimes I try to remember the bad stuff. And then it's like, oh, okay, it's a good thing I retired.
There is definitely good and bad in every single experience, but I love when the story has a happy ending. So, uh,
It
so,
certainly has.
so I guess my question for you now would be, having served such a beautiful long career, having been in the guard, having been in the reserves, having been enlisted, having been an officer, what advice would you have for our sisters coming up behind you?
Take bold action. Whatever you're doing, whatever is in front of you, be open to all the possibilities. Don't shut one down. Listen to all, but then make a move. Just take those moves because life is a one-way train. There's people getting on, there's people getting off. Make up your mind. Don't stay in between because the door's not going to close and then you're going to be in the middle. So take bold moves. Whatever that is that you got in front of you, just do it. In the military, there are so many opportunities for people. You could get PhDs, you could get master's degrees, you can go train with industry. You could go jump out of airplanes with the Belgique army or the French army or the Germans or whatever, whatever your thing is, even if it seems out of the box, take a bold move and make that call, take action and go do it.
Fantastic advice, because I have a saying, and if you're not growing, you are stagnating, and that is no way to live. So I love that advice. In fact, you don't even have to be active duty to take that advice. That is life advice wherever you are at in your journey right now. What is the next bold action you can take? to make your life better. And speaking of making lives better, I know that you're launching something amazing coming in January. So, do you want to tell us more about that so that we can support you?
Absolutely. So, in my years since my kids graduated from high school and moved on to college, I am an empty nester and I spend a lot of time helping and assisting and volunteering different people. And like I said, I've always been a proponent of good health and good wealth. So, my next project that's going to be launching in January. It's called Team Extra, and Team Extra is going to bring all kinds of different opportunities on how to improve your health, different ways, how we can better ourselves and have longevity in good health. Because, growing old is one thing, but growing old healthy and active is another. So we're going to, I'm testing all kinds of different products and things that we will talk about that will be good for people. And in general, how to achieve the next level of your health, as well as how to achieve your next level of wealth. So we talk about from the basics, whether you need help with basic budgeting and just getting yourself on track to purchasing your first home, or if a first home is not within your reach, then we can talk about a mobile home, which is another whole book that is coming out also along with this, how to grow your wealth, even if you are living in a mobile home and or can buy one to propel yourself to the next level, to investing in the stock market and to investing in multi-million dollar multifamily projects. And I can show you all of that. So like I said, I am a big proponent of trying to passing it forward to everyone. And these are some of the experiences that I have experienced. People along the way have helped me and have held my hand and said, hey, did you know that you can invest in this multi-million dollar investment? No, I don't have millions. Oh, well, you don't have to. Let me show you how. And so I have been super lucky to have, again, these wonderful angels around that have helped me along. And so that is my next project. So stay tuned. I love to share with everyone who's listening to this podcast and share it with others because, again, there's opportunity for growth everywhere we look. And the two things that I believe are most important are your health and, of course, your wealth.
Well, like I like to say, without those two things, can you really be free?
Absolutely not. So we
What
want
we
to achieve freedom.
That's right. It's what we serve for. So let's get our health right. Let's get our wealth right. And let's live our best life possible. It's what I talk about on my other podcast, Hot Topics Life Podcast. It's on YouTube. I'm just starting to share that, but it's tons of episodes. So if you're interested, go and search Hot Topics Live #podcast, and you can find out more about that. Once you are up and running, speaking of that, I'd love to have you come to Hot Topics Live and talk on my live. That's the video podcast. And we'll talk about what you're doing and some of those things on that podcast to that audience. And maybe you can help them as well as along with our veteran sisters.
Absolutely. Yeah, just let me know. Like I said, I'm working on it and I'm so excited to share so many opportunities for people to just get it on, get your best health and your best wealth.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the Female Veterans Podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure hearing your story and connecting with you today.
Thank you.
Well, one more question before I let you go. Is there anywhere we can follow along your journey? Are you on social media? Do you have a website or anything you would like to share?
Actually, I do. My Team Extra is www.teamextra.com. That is where the basic platform will be. And I still am working the details on the different channels, the TikTok and the Instagram, on how exactly that's going to look like. But perhaps I can share that with you to put on the notes so
That
people can follow us.
that sounds great. And if you've been following along, that everything will be in the show notes that I can put in there to support you on this podcast. I actually have changed up the format of the show notes to add in more information about the show. So let me know how you like those. You can join the newsletter. I'm still putting that together. You can go to the femaleveteranspodcast.com to give me your email to be on the newsletter or receive it when it starts coming out. And make sure you share and like these episodes all around. I'm on YouTube now, so you can listen to it in audio form on YouTube. You can listen to it on Apple, Spotify, on pretty much any platform, and just keep supporting what we're doing here and sharing our stories with the world because they need to know what we experience as women in our military. So, with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I want to say thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. I love you guys, and I will talk to you next time.